David Gilmour is our guest of honor today and our luncheon speaker. A copy of his interesting book is at your seat. It is a very, very interesting book, and you'll get a good kick out of reading it, and it's got a lot of everything, and it's really pretty special. We're going to try something a little different here. David and I will open the conversation up for questions after I'll have some questions for him, and he'll answer the questions, and after that, he'll take some questions from you folks. Before we begin, let me share a little bit of information about this fascinating man. David is a Canadian-born entrepreneur. It should be in capitals, I think, entrepreneur, who founded the South Pacific Hotel Corporation in 1969. It became the largest hotel chain in the South Pacific. A decade later, the chain was sold and the partners formed Barrick Gold Corporation, now the world's largest and most profitable gold mining firm. He then went on to start Fiji Water, the fastest growing premium U.S. beverage, when he divested himself, but he divested himself of the company in 2004, and I think he started it in 97?
96, yeah.
97. After David visited Waikia, am I spelling that right?
Waikia.
Waikia, an island of unspoiled natural beauty. He purchased it in 1972. And in 1990, he and his wife, Jill, opened up the Waikia,
you got it.
Yeah, club and spa as a very exclusive resort. In the early 2000s, David acquired Zinio, the world's largest digital magazine newsstand. Zinio pioneered paperless distribution and has introduced innovative digital marketing practices to many publishers. I think you have something like 6,500 magazines available there.
Exactly, in 19 languages.
His newest venture is Waikia Perfection, a suite of products that feature certified organic and sustainable products. And I'm sure he'll talk to us a little bit about that because it's a very interesting discussion. The Gilmore's charitable focus is on preschool education. They have built preschools in several areas of Fiji and the U.S. In recognition of his achievements, David was awarded the Order of Fiji in 1998. The Gilmores spend their time in Fiji, Palm Beach, and New York. So, we're ready? Let me see here. Get my equipment here.
Yes.
Try not to knock the sign down. So that would be helpful. David, I wrote a book, and it was a long time, took a lot of effort and everything. So I want to know whatever possessed you to write your book.
Apart from insanity, it was a long pushing, shoving of friends and educators, business associates, because not necessarily about me, but it was about the life that I was able to lead by accident. The fickle finger of fate led me from day one. I was born in an interesting time in the world. It was 1931, and blessed by remarkable parents. My mother was an opera singer, and my father was a First World War hero. Military cross a couple of times. So in 1937, at the age of 6, which really started my career and thought process, was when my father was invited to the coronation of King George VI. And I sat in the stands with him and next to him. And at age 6, the most indelible impression of my life was seeing the horse guards, the Royal Horse Guards on horseback, surrounding the golden coach to the coronation. And so indelible at that point that 13 years later I joined the Horse Guards. And it was a time of Korea, and I thought it was be an interesting experience that I needed. But that quick reflection to education, at age 6, just 5 miles from where we are, there are people without a preschool who at age 6 get the opportunity, guess what? To join a gang, get a life of drugs, crime, poverty. And so the difference was I could join the Horse Guards as my first memory. And somehow what I'm trying to do, and with Jill's help and the whole team of our preschool, we started these preschools because we honestly believe that's, and has been proven by psychiatrists and psychology, that a child's character is formed between 6 weeks and 5, 6 years old. That's when all of us in this room learned how to behave badly, be a bully, great persuader, or be useless. And it's now being proved during that period, if the child does not just is in a dysfunctional family, their brain atrophies, literally, never develops, because that's the formative period. And when you think what's going on now, the whole dream of everybody, and there are certain politicians, every American should go to college. It's not about college. How does a tree grow? From the roots, not the low-hanging fruit and the luxury of colleges. And what alternatives should be emphasized are perhaps trade schools. Today, a really skilled welder or mechanic can make a small fortune for themselves and security. If they go to college these days, perhaps the opportunity doesn't even exist on graduation for a job. So what Jill and I are doing with professionals is take children, and we proved it. We built one in Las Vegas for Andre Agassi, San Diego, a little area community north of San Diego that had 26 murders a year. And I remember the sheriff, a young Marine, came up and said, "Thank God you've arrived." Well, we built the school from 70% of all the children joining a gang at age 6, because that's when they like to sign them up. You poor child, we're going to make you important. From a dysfunctional family, that makes a lot of sense. So 70% were being recruited at that age. Now 90% don't. That is the reward. And that's the reward that I just hope when we complete the school here. Groundbreaking next week, is it? 2 or 3 weeks. By next Christmas, 300 children will get a chance for a future. And if we don't, 5 miles from here, did you know in the whole area of Palm Beach County, 41 gangs, crime, drugs are being traded right in front of Valley's little school that exists there now for 85 children. This is a shocking situation. And we're so generous. This community is so generous with so many, charities. But I think it's a question for America now is priorities. Without the priority of education at the root of the problem, not the low-hanging fruit, we're in for a very unfortunate future. Anyway, I got off track. I get so excited on the subject.
You mentioned in your book that it's not the strength of the wind, but the set of your sails that determines the way you go. When and where did that happen?
Well, I didn't determine it. The fickle finger of fate. The war ended in 1945, and there was a mad rush to get to school. And I was 12, 13 years old. And so my dad had the opportunity of poking me into a school, I think, can you hear me? Yeah. It was a British boarding school, Trinity College School, and crowded. I was put in the attic of the headmaster because getting as many kids in as possible. Just one little detail. They put me in 2 years early. So I was 2 years behind in every course. So I could excel in history and geography, but as far as mathematics or science, I just looked out the window. I was so far behind, didn't have a clue. I didn't connect the dots. My father certainly didn't, because he had plenty of other things to do in his life. So what happened is I came home from boarding school for the one weekend a term vacation, and he called me into the study and he said, "Son, I love you, but you're not very bright. I get your report cards, they're disastrous. You seem to only like history and English, and this is not going to get you very far in life. So I'm going to give you a choice. The choice is $10 a day. For every holiday, I'll drop you off on a tramp steamer anywhere in the world you want to go. And on $10 a day, come back the day before school. One condition, you travel always alone. If I catch you traveling with a girl or boy, the deal is off." I thought, well, this is pretty good way of getting rid of me. But no, the wisdom was being alone all the time. I met the most fascinating people who took me under their wing. For example, I came out of a bullfight in Madrid, and which I sort of fancied myself, and went to a tapas bar, and this bearded fellow in the corner said, "Are you alone, son?" And I said, "Yes, sir. Well, join me for dinner." And it was Ernest Hemingway. And we spent a couple of weeks touring the bulls, an experience that was just amazing. And many other names, and I don't want to sit here dropping names, but most of the celebrities of that time were in Europe that summer, or the summers thereafter, from Fred Astaire to Grace Kelly, to met them all. And by the way, if I ever write a second book, I'll fill in all the gory details. You'll know the names. I'm sure some of you are in there, and I'm going to not spare anyone. Only joking. So that just changed my life, because it wasn't going to be education. I continued to fail because I was 2 years behind every other student until I got to college. And then I sort of caught up in my mind about business and things, got a few ideas myself, and I went to a business school at the University of Toronto. And after the first year, I called my dad last weekend of the summer and said, "Dad, I'm joining the Army." He said, "What?" After me putting up with failing most of your life, why are you joining the Army? And I said, "Well, sir, the curriculum in those days was so pathetic that, I'd already started a little business, and I said that these people, I think I could probably teach them a thing or two. It was so primitive. So I quit school, joined the Army, which was the best thing that could have ever happened to me. I think every child, every male in America should have 2 years in the Army. Put a little hair on the chest and a little character in the body. But anyway, that's another story.
Did you learn how to drink daiquiris from Hemingway there? Was he drinking daiquiris at that time?
I can't ever tell that.
You were involved in many startups. I don't know, a dozen maybe more. Can you speak to your favorites?
Well, my favorite was really Fiji Water, because I'd left Barrick Gold because I wasn't interested in businesses continuing to get bigger and larger. Once I'd reached a certain level, I just sort of lost interest. And what happened was that I was in Fiji with Jill. We were on our little golf course. Is this a little louder, please? Little louder? Yes, please. I was with Jill, and we were on our little 9-hole golf course on the island. and someone in front of us, this couple, were digging into their golf bag and digging out a bottle of Evian that we'd imported 10,000 miles. And I looked at Joan and I said, there's something wrong with this picture. And she said, what? The parrots are too loud? Or what's your problem? I said, that man's drinking water from a population of 3 billion people, one of the most polluted parts of the world. I bet 100 miles from where we're standing, we find the ultimate source, the purest water to bottle. And I started the company without any market testing because I just knew at that time in America that there was a lot of problems in various cities around the country that had water problems. And water is very important, that you drink enough and that it's pure enough. So started the company, and what people don't know, and I don't know whether I go into it too much in the book, the Fiji Water became the fastest growing premium beverage in the world, and we never spent a penny on advertising. This is heresy, as you can imagine. But what we did was build it on design of the bottle and a marketing philosophy that visibility creates trial, and trial creates advocacy. So what happened was, overnight, we made it available on TV shows and movies, charitable events, and suddenly, because the bottle was so identifiable, the original one, not the one that the new owners have changed to, but it was so striking, people said, well, why are they drinking it? Why aren't I? And then we made it available for visibility on every single possible outlet, whether it be a Korean grocer or a Latino barrack selling coffee. And it just took off, and before we knew it, we were selling 14 million cases a year, which, why did I sell? Because it had become a commodity. Everybody said, if that idiot Gilmore can do it, we can. So we went from 600 bottled waters to about 6,000. And so sold it satisfactorily. And that led to my second favorite business, which is now Wakaya Perfection, because I was a guest speaker at the American Express conference, I guess because of the success of Fiji Water. And I went down to Miami to the Four Seasons. There were 400 people, and the whole theme was, for 4 days, decide what is the most important luxury in the world. And very important for American Express. What is the greatest luxury? So everybody came to the conclusion on the fourth day, the time, very logical. Time is the most important luxury we can have. And I must have had a glass of wine or something, because I did stand up and say, that's all nonsense to me. What's the point of having more time in your life if you don't have your health? So driving back up to Palm Beach, I said, Gilmore, you've really torn it this time. You've started to be a critic instead of an author. So I thought, what can we do? Well, my research group and my key employees studied things, and we found out that you don't need chemicals for most of our cures. I thought 15 years ago I was never playing golf again. And at 85, I don't have arthritis, heart disease, Alzheimer's, all due to inflammation. So when you know the root of the problem is inflammation, and there are two very natural things that for hundreds of years, Chinese and the Indians have been using turmeric and ginger. So on our island, we started to grow it. And it was an unusual turmeric because we researched the seed from seed that was brought in 1895 from India and China by the indentured labor, harvested it in the jungle, brought it out, put it in our very high nutrient soil, and lo and behold, what the research labs tell us, it's 300 to 500% stronger than anything ever grown before. It's doing the job for me, and look at my beautiful wife.
90 years.
Oh, first time I ever married a woman older than myself. Darling, forgive me. Beat me later. So that's why I'm rather enthusiastic about that business. Out of 12, those are my 2 winners.
You mentioned in the book that the only thing that's constant in life is change. After traveling 8 million miles, living 85 years, what changes have upset you the most?
Oh, that's an interesting question. At this stage in my life, I've seen incredible changes wherever I've gone. When I started really absorbing things at age 6, because my mother being an opera singer, I remember the day we were introduced to Herr Hitler, because she was a Wagnerian opera singer as well, and up close and interesting to Hitler. I saw the devil, even at that stage. That was the most early frightening thing I'd had. It was a memory. The horse guards at the coronation. From then on, I was blessed to be born and go to places that kept their integrity. But less and less integrity is going on. In tourism, most of it's becoming worse than an oil spill. So there are disasters about, but in America, the sad thing is, and why Jill and I are involved with the education is an abomination in this country. It is really embarrassing. A high school, for example, in New York, and we spent a lot of time in New York, the union enthusiastically announced that 74% graduated. 4% were ever qualified to go to college. So it was cooking the books, as they say, fixing the results. And so when things are that bad, and then we'd been building San Diego, Las Vegas, and other places, and discover after 10 years here, where we were really just winter snowflakes, we discovered what was going on just 5 miles from all our houses, over the bridge, drive out of Okeechobee, and where our school is being built, turn left at the luxurious Mercedes-Benz agency, 100 meters behind it, drug dealing on the doorstep of the school. Gangs, crime, drugs. So really it's that root, and I think if we in this community don't pull together and get our priorities straight and realize that education is the future of this country, then the second thing, and you're sorry I asked me, aren't you? Second thing is health. I was in a golf shop selling golf clothing, I won't mention the name, where I put on a pair, now I cut too thin, but I was trying on the golf trousers, and the woman said, well, we had to change, you see. The American body is becoming so big that for the thighs and the back sides, we had to change the cut completely. So then you dig deeper, and within 2 or 3 years, 1 out of every 3 Americans will have diabetes. Shocking. Obesity went from 1990, from 10%, this year it'll be 35%. What's happening? Well, it's the food. It's the processed food that we're getting. 70% of it is genetically altered. Things are allowed in this country like a Diet Coke. Whenever you see a particularly overweight person, they usually have a Diet Coke in front of them. which, by the way, there are 1 billion bottles of Coke sold a day. Can you imagine? And it's toxic. Sugar is toxic. Sugar is pure toxic. Now, we didn't know that because apparently somebody had been paying the Harvard Research Institute money to blame saturated fats, not sugar. Sugar is poison. Aspartame, fructose are poison. In fact, aspartame is outlawed in Europe, England, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and China. Guess where it's legal? Washington. So, we're killing ourselves with weight, health issues. This will be the first young generation that will not outlive us. Never happened before. Why? The diet, the food, the school diet, French fries and, just ridiculous food feeding to children. Children's hospitals. A friend of ours just the other day had a child in the hospital, saw the lunch come in, and it wanted to evacuate the child home. Didn't let them eat another meal. It was rubbish. So we got to wake up to health and education.
You may have answered this question here. At a certain time in everyone's age, the question of legacy comes to mind. How do you want to be remembered?
Well, I'd love to be remembered a little bit with Jill for education and health. That's easy. That's the easiest question you get.
Is there some questions from the audience?
How can we help you on your mission with reference to health and with children? Because I totally agree with you. I don't eat sugar. I haven't had a Coke in 30 years. I don't eat anything processed. I eat nothing. I cook it myself. I own a wonderful restaurant, but I choose properly. I totally agree with you 100%. So how can we help?
Thank you. Well, Ali, would you stand up? She's the principal of our little school. The new one is called the Erin Gilmore School. We've named it after my daughter, who was murdered when she was 22 by a drug addict. And if that murderer, I think, had gone to a preschool, she'd be alive today. But that being said, the emphasis in what Ali's doing is the diet. In the kitchen, they're serving these kids in the new school. It's something, usually Jill and I have financed the entire school in all these other places because it was easier. I provide the bricks and mortar and somehow they go on forever. Here, this is going to be a little bigger operation, not 100 children, it's going to be 300. And so, but it's been very difficult to raise funds because naturally there are so many charities that we all have dear to our heart. But this one is our survival. This one will be our security. And this one should be our conscience. And so Ali and the team, David Girton, where are you? There's David, who's in charge of getting the financial thing going. Jill and I donated $2 million to kick it off. Where the budget is $8 million, and we're at 7. We've been able to raise a lot of interest, but still not enough. And then to really make everybody depressed, there's another cesspool, which is Riviera Beach area. Same situation as Westgate that I just described. And I hope that we can lead the band to build a second school. When that's underway, then I'm going to go to Washington with Bob. And anybody who'll join this crusade to Washington, because I think it's time government got the right end of the stick on education, and it's preschool from coast to coast. Then we can look forward to generations that have a chance. Today, they don't, unless they're privileged.
Well, David, thank you very much. It was wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.